the shattered battlefield. The smoke of war still hung over the desert canyon like a funeral shroud. Where once stood the last fortress of humanity, only burning husks and crumbling concrete remained. Alien war engines prowled the ruins, their jagged metal silhouettes cutting against the horizon. The Zerath Dominion had done what they always promised: crushed resistance, enslaved the survivors, and salted the ashes of those who defied them. For the Zerath, this was victory. Their soldiers, towering reptilian figures clad in chitinous armor, roared in triumph. Around the shattered stronghold, they raised their banners and broadcasted their victory across the stars. The humans are broken. The last of Earth's warriors are gone. And yet, in the shadowed gullies of the canyon floor, the truth lingered like an ember waiting to flare. High Commander Krivak of the Zerath surveyed the field with contempt. His massive frame hunched over a holographic map as his lieutenants reported the cleanup. Resistance ended. Human command structures eliminated. Their machines no longer function. He hissed through his mandibles, a sound that passed for laughter. Pathetic prey. Clever, yes, but fragile. Their kind will be remembered as a species that fought hard and died harder. Around him, his warriors cheered. To them, the war was over. The humans' last defenses had crumbled, and their enemy was a fading echo in the dust. But not all of the Zerath were so sure. Scouts returned with strange reports, patrols vanishing without trace, mutilated corpses found in ravines, and claw marks on armor that did not match any human weapon. Rumors spread quickly in an army fattened by victory that something still hunted them in these canyons. A beast, or perhaps a human who had slipped through their grasp. Krivak dismissed it at first. Fear spreads among the weak. Find this creature and crush it. No prey escapes the Dominion. But even he could not ignore the silence that followed entire squads dispatched into the rocky wastelands. Far below the alien encampments, a lone figure moved with purpose. Captain Daniel Rourke adjusted the straps of his scarred combat armor, its once pristine plating now pitted and scorched from months of war. The HUD in his helmet flickered with limited power, showing him only fragments of tactical data. He didn't need it anymore. The battlefield had become his home, but he was not alone. Perched on his arms were two shadows of the sky, feathers glinting in the fading sun. One was a bald eagle, massive and regal, her golden eyes scanning the horizon with unyielding vigilance. The other, a golden eagle, darker, fiercer, with a sharpness in his gaze that mirrored Daniel's own. Their names were Valkyrie and Ares, and together they had become predators that the Zerath could neither predict nor defend against. Daniel crouched atop a ridge, studying the alien patrols below. His eagles shifted, restless but silent, as though they too understood the stakes. He reached up, brushing the edge of Valkyrie's wing. "Easy, girl," he whispered, his voice low and steady. "We'll make our move soon." The bond between them was not forged in war, but in childhood. Long before the Zerath invasion, Daniel's father had taught him falconry in the wilderness. He learned patience, the art of trust, and the lethal efficiency of birds who live by the hunt. When Earth fell into chaos, those lessons became his weapon. Where machines failed, the eagles thrived. Where humans scattered, Daniel endured. And now, in the ruins of a fallen world, he would turn those lessons against the invaders. Below, a Zerath patrol trudged across the canyon floor, their alien rifles slung lazily over their shoulders. They laughed in their guttural language, mocking the humans who had once dared to resist. To them, this was just another sweep, a routine task to prove there was no threat left. Daniel's hand tightened into a fist. The time had come. With a sharp whistle, nearly lost in the wind, he gave the signal. Valkyrie launched into the sky, wings spread wide, vanishing into the clouds. Ares followed a heartbeat later, his screech echoing off the canyon walls. The Zerath froze, scanning the skies in confusion. One soldier raised his weapon, too late. Valkyrie struck first, talons sinking deep into the alien's exposed throat. Blood sprayed across the rocks as she tore free, screeching with fury. Before the others could react, Ares swooped low, his talons raking across another warrior's faceplate, shattering the fragile optics. The alien fell screaming, blinded and thrashing. Daniel was already moving. He slid down the ridge, drawing his combat knife in one hand and a jury-rigged explosive in the other. He hit the canyon floor with the precision of a predator, knife flashing as he drove it into the chest of a staggered Zerath. Another turned to face him, but Daniel had already hurled the explosive, a crude device of scavenged parts, that detonated with a bone-shaking blast, sending shards of rock through alien armor. In less than a minute, the patrol was gone. Shattered bodies lay across the dust, torn by talons, scorched by fire, and cut by a human's relentless hand. Daniel stood amidst the carnage, his chest heaving. Valkyrie circled overhead before landing on his arm, feathers ruffled but uninjured. Ares perched on a boulder, blood dripping from his talons, eyes still sharp for danger. The canyon was silent once more, save for the distant rumble of alien machinery. Daniel looked at his companions, then toward the enemy's stronghold on the horizon. His jaw tightened. The Zerath thought they had won. They thought humanity was broken, beaten, extinct. But they hadn't counted on him. They hadn't counted on them. "Let's remind them," Daniel muttered, stroking Valkyrie's feathers. "Predators don't bow to prey." The eagles shrieked in answer, a sound that carried through the canyon like a war cry. And somewhere in the alien camp, a Zerath soldier shivered at the echo, sensing that their victory was already unraveling. Predators of the sky. The canyon wind howled as night draped itself across the wasteland. Fires from the ruined human fortress still burned in the distance, painting the horizon red. From above, the twin silhouettes of Valkyrie and Ares cut through the fading light, circling wide before returning to Daniel's side. They landed in perfect synchrony, talons scraping stone, feathers ruffled but proud. Daniel crouched beside a dying campfire hidden in a crevice. He pulled a strip of dried rations from a pouch, breaking it in half. Valkyrie accepted her share with a sharp snap of her beak, while Ares tore in his like a predator fresh from a kill. Daniel smiled faintly, exhaustion creasing the corners of his face. "Good work out there," he murmured. "Fast, clean, and brutal. Just the way they need to remember us." The eagles tilted their heads, golden eyes glinting in the firelight. To Daniel, they weren't just animals. They were partners, soldiers, and family. The bond they shared wasn't born from war, but from years of trust, training, and something deeper, something the Zerath could never replicate. When Daniel closed his eyes, memories came flooding back. He saw himself as a boy, standing barefoot in the forests of Montana, holding a leather glove too big for his arm. His father, a stern but patient man, guided his stance. "Falconry isn't about control, Danny," he had said. "It's about respect. You don't command a predator. You earn its trust, and it chooses to fight beside you." A shadow crossed the boy's vision, and suddenly a young eagle swept down, talons gripping the glove with frightening force. Daniel had flinched at first, but his father's hand steadied him. "Don't fear the talons. Fear what happens when you lose their trust." That was the day his life had changed. What started as training became a brotherhood. He grew with them, bled with them, and when the Zerath came to Earth, those lessons turned into weapons. Now, in the ruins of a dead world, those birds were more than hunters. They were legends. The Zerath soldiers were beginning to feel it. At first, they had laughed at the reports. Humans with pets, they had sneered. Primitive creatures, worthless against the Dominion. But laughter turned to unease when patrols failed to return. Their advanced rifles and energy shields meant nothing against talons that struck where armor was weakest, at the eyes, the throat, the joints. Worse still, they could not predict them. Drones failed to track the eagles. Sensors were blinded by their speed. No machine could calculate the instincts of predators bred by millions of years of survival. The fear spread like wildfire. In the alien camps, soldiers whispered of a sky devil that plucked warriors from the ground, of a beastmaster human who walked with monsters. Their morale, once unshakable, began to fracture. Daniel used that fear as a weapon. On the second night, after the ambush, he scouted the edges of a Zerath supply convoy moving through the canyon pass. Dozens of alien soldiers marched in formation, escorting a hovercraft stacked with ammunition and plasma fuel cells. Their arrogance was palpable, loud, careless, as if the desert itself bowed to their power. Daniel smirked beneath his hood. Perfect. He crouched low, raising his arm. Valkyrie tensed, feathers bristling. With a soft whistle, Daniel gave the command. She launched into the sky, silent as a shadow. Moments later, a scream split the night. An alien toppled backward, his throat torn out, his rifle clattering to the sand. The convoy erupted in chaos. Weapons fired wildly, bolts of plasma scorching the rocks. The soldiers formed a circle, sensors scanning desperately. Then Ares struck, plummeting like a spear, talons raking across another alien's exposed eye sockets. Blood sprayed across the convoy lights. The Zerath panicked, firing into the sky at phantoms they couldn't hit. And then Daniel moved. He slid into the chaos like a ghost, pulling the pin on an explosive charge and hurling it beneath the hovercraft. The blast ripped through the night, flames engulfing the vehicle in a thunderous roar. Ammunition cooked off in violent bursts, tearing holes through the Zerath formation. Through smoke and fire, Daniel cut down survivors with cold precision. His knife flashed in one hand while his pistol barked in the other, each shot guided by years of muscle memory. Above him, the eagles continued their dance of death, blinding, tearing, scattering. Within minutes, the convoy was nothing but wreckage. Daniel wiped the blood from his visor, chest heaving. Around him, the canyon floor was littered with alien corpses. Valkyrie landed beside him, feathers scorched but unbroken. Ares swooped low, wings spreading wide, as if to declare victory over the dead. The firelight reflected in Daniel's eyes as he gazed at the destruction. This was no longer just survival. This was war, his war. He knew the Zerath High Command would hear of this soon. They would send more troops, stronger ones, elite hunters bred for extermination. But that was fine. Let them come. He looked at his companions, the predators who had chosen him as much as he had chosen them. They think they own this world, he said, voice low but steady. But we were born here. We bled here, and we'll make them fear the skies. Valkyrie shrieked, her cry carrying across the canyon like a war horn. Ares followed with a screech that made the rocks tremble. Somewhere in the night, a Zerath soldier shivered, his scaled flesh crawling at the sound. The Dominion thought themselves hunters, but tonight they learned what it felt like to be prey. The last stand of humanity. The desert dawn broke red, the sun rising like blood over the horizon. Smoke drifted lazily from the wreckage of the destroyed convoy, its twisted metal husks casting jagged shadows across the canyon. Daniel crouched among the rubble, his helmet visor cracked, his breath ragged. He'd survived another night, but the fight was far from over. Across his chest, secured beneath layers of scorched armor, rested the most important thing he carried, a small, battered case. Inside was humanity's last encrypted data core, filled with tactical knowledge, medical advances, cultural archives, and blueprints for weapons that could one day tip the scales back in humanity's favor. If he fell, everything would be lost. He looked down at his companions. Valkyrie perched silently on a jagged rock, feathers slick with dew, eyes sharp as ever. Ares stood nearby, his wings half spread as though ready to strike at the rising sun itself. Daniel reached out, brushing his fingers against Valkyrie's breast feathers. "They'll come harder today," he muttered. "They can't ignore us anymore." As if on cue, a deep rumble echoed through the canyon. Engines, marching boots. The air vibrated with the approach of something far more organized than a patrol. Daniel's jaw tightened. The Zerath were moving in force. High Commander Krivak's fury had finally broken through the arrogance of a species. Reports of slaughtered soldiers and destroyed convoys had forced his hand. This was no longer about cleanup. It was about extermination. He deployed an elite hunting cadre, warriors bred and trained to destroy resistant prey. Alongside them came swarms of aerial drones, each equipped with high-speed plasma cannons and heavy walkers whose footfalls shook the ground. They came for Daniel. From his vantage point, Daniel counted at least 100 troops sweeping the canyon floor. The drones buzzed above like a swarm of steel locusts, scanning for heat signatures. Walkers lumbered forward, plasma turrets swiveling, ready to turn stone to glass. Daniel exhaled slowly. Against such numbers, his odds were near zero. But retreat was not an option. If the Zerath captured him, the data core would be lost. Worse, humanity's legacy would die with him. He turned to Valkyrie and Ares. "One more fight," he said, voice calm despite the thunder building around them. "We make it count." The first drones spotted him minutes later. Their optics glowed red as they screeched alarms to the army below. Plasma fire ripped through the ridge, blasting stone into shards. Daniel dove behind cover, rolling into a crevice as the eagles launched skyward. Valkyrie struck first, a blur of feathers and fury. She slammed into a drone's sensor array, tearing wires and optics with her talons. Sparks exploded in the sky as the machine spun out of control, crashing into the rocks below. Ares followed, his wings folding tight as he dove like a missile, smashing into another drone and shredding it apart. The aliens on the ground opened fire, plasma bolts streaking upward. Daniel used the chaos to his advantage. He sprinted from cover to cover, planting improvised charges along the canyon walls. He knew the terrain better than they did, every crevice, every fault line. When he saw barren stone, he saw opportunity. Explosions ripped through the canyon as his traps detonated, showering the Zerath with rock slides. Troops were buried alive, their armored bodies crushed beneath falling stone. The formation faltered, and Daniel struck, emerging from the smoke with his rifle barking. Every shot was precise, deliberate, cutting down alien after alien. Still, their numbers pressed forward. The drones kept coming. The walkers advanced, their cannons unleashing waves of plasma that melted stone to slag. Daniel felt the searing heat wash over him, his armor scorching as he rolled aside, just in time. Then came the blow he feared most. A plasma bolt, wild and uncontrolled, caught Ares mid-flight. The golden eagle shrieked in agony, his wing engulfed in fire. He spiraled downward, crashing hard onto the canyon floor. Daniel's heart clenched, but there was no time to reach him. Valkyrie dove to shield her brother, spreading her wings wide and screeching defiantly at the advancing soldiers. Rage burned through Daniel's veins. He fired until his rifle clicked empty, then drew his knife and charged. Plasma bolts seared the air around him, but he didn't stop. He became a storm of fury, slashing, stabbing, tearing through the Zerath ranks like a man possessed. His movements were not random. They were calculated, precise, the culmination of a lifetime of survival and war. Every strike was guided by instinct sharpened to a razor's edge. Every decision was made in the space between breaths. Still, exhaustion clawed at him. His body screamed in protest, his lungs burned, his muscles ached. But he refused to fall, not while Valkyrie still fought, not while Ares still breathed. Through the haze of smoke and fire, Daniel spotted the towering silhouette of the lead walker. Its plasma cannons swiveled toward him, glowing with deadly heat. If it fired, everything, him, the eagles, the data core, would be reduced to ash. With his last charge of explosives, Daniel made his move. He sprinted across the canyon floor, plasma fire scorching the ground at his heels. He hurled the device onto the walker's exposed joint and dove behind cover. The explosion ripped through its leg, sending the massive machine toppling sideways in a thunderous crash. The shockwave rolled through the battlefield, scattering Zerath soldiers and silencing the guns for a heartbeat. Daniel staggered to his feet, blood running down his visor. He looked to where Ares lay, battered but alive, and to Valkyrie, who stood defiantly over him. His chest tightened with fierce pride. The Zerath might outnumber him 100 to 1, But they had underestimated something far more dangerous than human technology. They had underestimated the will of a man with nothing left to lose and the fury of predators who chose him as their kin. The battle raged on, but for the first time, cracks appeared in the Dominion's certainty. The humans had not died out. They were not prey. They were predators, and predators fought to the last breath. The predators' lesson. The canyon floor was a graveyard. Smoke curled from shattered walkers. Alien corpses lay broken in heaps, and the sand was blackened with blood both human and alien. Daniel stood in the midst of it all, his armor dented and scorched, his knife slick with gore. His breath came in ragged bursts, every muscle screaming from exhaustion. Valkyrie circled above, her wings spread wide, her cries echoing through the canyon like the call of a goddess of war. Ares lay wounded but alive, bandaged hastily with scraps of Daniel's torn uniform. Even injured, his golden eyes burned with feral hatred. And still, the Zerath came. From the smoke, their final commander emerged. High Commander Krivak, towering over his warriors, his chitinous armor gleaming in the firelight. His crest of spines rattled as he stepped forward, his voice echoing like thunder. Human, Krivak hissed, his mandibles flexing. You have spilled much blood, but your defiance ends here. Alone, wounded, broken, what can you hope to achieve against the Dominion? Daniel wiped the blood from his visor, his jaw tightening. His voice was hoarse but steady. You made one mistake. Krivak tilted his head. And what mistake is that? Daniel raised his arm, where Valkyrie landed with a screech that split the sky. Her talons dug into his gauntlet, her feathers bristling with rage. Daniel's eyes narrowed behind his cracked visor. You thought humans were prey. The battlefield erupted once more. Krivak charged, his massive blade hissing with energy, cleaving the air toward Daniel. Sparks flew as Daniel barely blocked with his knife, the sheer force of the blow sending him skidding across the sand. Krivak pressed forward, each strike hammering down with the weight of a predator who believed himself untouchable. But Daniel wasn't fighting alone. Valkyrie dove from the sky, her talons raking across Krivak's armored crest. The alien roared in fury, swiping at her with his blade, but she twisted away, leaving deep gouges across his armor. Daniel seized the opening, lunging forward with his knife. He drove it deep into the alien's side, twisting hard. Krivak bellowed in pain, backhanding him with such force that Daniel slammed into the canyon wall, his armor cracking from the impact. He slumped to the ground, dazed, his vision blurring. Through the haze, he saw Krivak advancing, blade raised for the killing strike. And then Ares moved. Despite his wounds, the golden eagle launched himself from the ground with a screech that rattled the stones. He slammed into Krivak's face, talons digging into one of his compound eyes. The High Commander howled, staggering backward as blood poured from the ruined socket. Daniel forced himself to his feet. Pain seared every nerve, but he pushed through it, gripping his knife with renewed strength. He sprinted forward, every ounce of his will focused on this one moment. Krivak swung blindly, his blade carving arcs of plasma through the air, but Daniel slipped inside his guard. With a roar, he drove his knife up into the alien's throat, burying it to the hilt. At the same instant, Valkyrie struck again, talons piercing deep into Krivak's chest, tearing through chitin and flesh. Ares, bloodied but unbroken, raked his remaining good eye. The alien High Commander collapsed to his knees, gurgling, his blade falling from his grasp. His mandibles worked soundlessly, as though still unable to comprehend what had happened. Daniel leaned close, his voice a rasp of fury and triumph. This is the lesson you'll take to your grave, Krivak. Humans are not prey. We are predators, and predators never bow. With a final twist of his blade, Krivak fell, crashing to the sand with a thunderous impact. His blood seeped into the canyon floor, the Dominion's pride bleeding out with him. Silence followed. The surviving Zerath soldiers froze, their discipline shattered. Their High Commander, the symbol of their invincibility, laid dead at the hands of a single human and his battle eagles. Fear rippled through their ranks like a disease. One by one, they dropped their weapons and fled into the smoke, their morale broken beyond repair. Daniel stood over Krivak's corpse, swaying on his feet, his strength nearly gone. Valkyrie landed on his shoulder, feathers singed but victorious. Ares limped to his side, his eyes still fierce despite his wounds. Daniel reached into his armor, pulling free the battered data core. With trembling hands, he activated its transmitter, sending a final encrypted burst into the void, to whatever human colonies still remained scattered among the stars. Humanity's memory, its defiance, its fire, would survive. He sank to one knee, exhaustion threatening to drag him under. He looked up at the sky, now streaked with smoke and fire, and let out a bitter laugh. Against all odds, he was still standing. The Zerath thought they had crushed humanity. They thought their empire eternal, their dominance unquestioned. But they had not reckoned with the stubbornness of a human soldier or the fury of the predators who fought beside him. As the sun broke through the smoke, Daniel rose once more, leaning heavily on his knife like a staff. Valkyrie spread her wings, screeching into the dawn. Ares added his broken cry, a sound ragged but defiant. Together, their voices carried across the canyon. Not just a victory cry, but a promise. Humanity was not finished. Closing lines. Aliens thought they won. But the day they underestimated a human and his battle eagles was the day their empire began to die.